Hello and welcome. Glad you stayed with us. Improving your mental health is simple, but it's not easy. One way of doing this, the approach we're taking in this video series, is to suggest improving in changing your basic beliefs so that they are consistent with the inborn intentions. To do this effectively, you'll need three things. The first thing you need is a definition of mental health itself. The second thing you need to know is knowledge of and ways to avoid the major obstacle that the subconscious mind will throw up into your pathways when you start to make a change. And the third thing that you need is a clear, concise, simple process for making the changes, the necessary changes in your basic beliefs itself. We have already discussed at length the definition of mental health in previous video. Just as a reminder though, mental health is the condition or state of mind that's determined by the correlation or agreement or disagreement between your learned basic beliefs and the intrinsic inborn intentions. With that definition of mental health firmly in mind, you are also going to need the process for change, which I'll get to very shortly. But first, we've got to discuss the major obstacle that is going to be thrown up when you begin to make a change. And that obstacle, the name of that obstacle is truth. To understand why truth is such an obstacle to change, it's necessary, important for you, useful for you to know something about the difference between your thinking brain and your feeling brain. When you're in your thinking brain, your mind is free to assess, to communicate, to calculate, to plan, to do all the wonderful things that the human mind is capable of doing, all based on your store of basic beliefs. You go about your daily business unimpeded by anxiety. But when anxiety strikes, it's a different matter. The only thing that your mind will allow you to do under the influence of anxiety, depending on the severity of the anxiety, but to some extent, no matter what the strength of the provocation is, when anxiety strikes, your mind is perceiving something to be a threat because it is contrary to what you believe to be so. It is contrary to a basic belief. And when you have these two systems in your brain, the thinking brain and the feeling brain, it's like having two control mechanisms, both of which have completely different objectives. The thinking brain allows you to operate fully, completely, unimpeded, but the feeling brain must control you so that you are safe. This is not an option. It is a built-in mechanism to we as humans, and it is going to be predominant anytime that anxiety strikes because of a conflict between what is happening and what your beliefs tell you are so. To explain how the feeling brain gets activated, consider that, remember that all of your basic beliefs are true. And when there is any sensation that comes into your body, whether you see it, feel it, taste it, smell it, sense it, or whatever, when that sensation is contrary to a basic belief, it goes against some truth that is held by the basic belief, your body perceives that to be a threat. This may not be logical, it's not necessarily logical, but the feeling brain has its own logic. And as soon as this happens, it responds by releasing adrenaline, and you perceive that as anxiety. And the instant that anxiety strikes, you are going to initiate a defense mechanism in order to protect you. This is not an optional procedure that you elect to do. It is how the human body is built to protect itself in the face of danger. This is absolutely essential for our long-term well-being, but sometimes the feeling brain will protect when protection is not really necessary and can even be counterproductive. I know this isn't logical, but on the other hand, the feeling brain doesn't operate on logic. When anxiety strikes, there is a conspicuous absence of reason and logic, and reason and logic can just be damned. The feeling brain is going to protect you. You may have noticed this in your own lives in instances past. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. So you might be wondering, what's all this got to do with my mental health? Just this. As soon as you start to think about changing a basic belief, your subconscious mind, your feeling brain, is going to consider that as a threat. And when that threat occurs, and it's a threat because it's contrary to what you believe to be true, and any challenge to a truth is by definition a threat. And so when this happens, it's going to throw up one or more or many defense mechanisms to keep you from doing what your cognitive, your thinking brain, you really would like to do. This is strange, but it nevertheless is a universal phenomenon. When it happens to you, don't think it's a shortcoming or a moral flaw or a character flaw or a defect in you in some way. It's your body doing what it is supposed to do, protect you from a threat. And as I've mentioned, a threat is anything that is a challenge to a basic belief that is true. So, in order to improve your mental health, it's necessary to manage anxiety and stay in your thinking brain. You are in your thinking brain by default when there is no anxiety, and you will always return to it when the threat passes, when you're no longer perceiving something to be a threat or a danger. That's the good part. But until that threat is eliminated or avoided or forgotten about, and you're no longer aware of it, you're going to stay in your feeling brain. But we want to get back to the thinking brain in order to make the progress that we need to improve mental health. If you want to know more about how to manage anxiety, please go to my website, www.pathways-to-mentalhealth.com. Once the website is open, look on the right for Post by Category. Click the arrow by Select Category and click again on Anxiety. This will take you to the category archives, where you'll find the article, How to Reduce Unavoidable Anxiety. This article will be very helpful in dealing with anxiety when you don't choose to change a basic belief. Notice that basic beliefs are involved in both your thinking brain and your feeling brain. When you're in your thinking brain, you are free to go about your daily activities unimpeded by anxiety, restricted only by the content of your basic beliefs. They are limiting to what you think and feel and do, but nevertheless, you're free to exercise yourself within that single constraint. But when anxiety strikes, by the fact that a basic belief has been challenged, or there is some conflict between what's happening in the outside world and you perceive it as a threat, then you are no longer free to operate, and your basic beliefs have essentially thrown you into a protective mode. Notice that how each and every sensation that comes into the body, how it reacts and how it interfaces with a basic beliefs determine whether you are in your thinking brain or in your feeling brain. A very important concept to keep in mind. Okay, that's pretty much what I would like for you to understand as an introduction to your thinking brain and feeling brain. Just as an unimportant aside, while I was writing the book that was later published under the title of Pathways to Mental Health and Anxiety Management, before that book was published and during its developmental process, a working title for the book was Thinking Brain, Feeling Brain. So that might give you some indication of the importance that I attach to this concept and how we operate so differently under one and under the other. Okay, as an assignment for this video, you knew there would be one. What I'd like for you to do is to think of an instance in your past when you said or did something that you wish later that you had not done. What have you done recently, or not so recently, that you later regretted? Now then, consider, was that behavior that you did, was that, how did that protect you? Was it an act of freezing, or more likely running, or perhaps even fighting? What was your defense mechanism as expressed in some behavior that you later thought, maybe that wasn't such a good idea? Let's start out with the understanding that that behavior was a defense mechanism. Your task is to figure out exactly how and why. You might want to take this concept even a little further and think a little about how many of our activities, how many of our behaviors have an element of defensiveness about them, even though we're not aware of them, and there would not be a threat if it were not for the fact that we had used a preventative defense mechanism, if you will. A lot of our activities, a lot of our life is involved in that kind of behavior as well. Okay, next time we will take up the defense mechanisms that the feeling brain can bring up as a protection against the threat to your truth. And this is, there are a number of these, and simply being aware of them will enable you to avoid them for the most part. So that will be an interesting topic. That's all for now then. Thanks again for watching, and remember, anxiety is your friend, but that friend sometimes needs management. Take care. Bye for now.